Hi, we are going to discuss about pulmonary gas exchange. Now, what is that? As we know, the pulmonary ventilation, it has two steps. One is inspiration and one is expiration. And by the inspiration process, we take the atmospheric oxygen, it crosses the alveolar epithelium and the membrane and goes to the systemic circulation, then to the tissue. From there, carbon dioxide is released and come to the systemic circulation, and again it goes out of the body by the process of expiration. Now, this arterial blood gas values, that is the partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide, is a mainstay of diagnosis of so many diseases like the hypoxia, then the ventilation perfusion mismatch if it is there, if there is any pathological shunt. So this is very important to know the how this gas exchange means from atmosphere to blood or from the blood to going out through the alveoli to the atmosphere. So this is the basic. There are the various physical processes which involves in this gas exchange. Now we are going to know about the site of pulmonary gas exchange, where it happens. We know that there are 300 million of alveoli present in both the lungs. And this alveoli are surrounded by special type of circulatory blood, or this are very thin. The alveolar membrane are enough thin to diffuse the oxygen and carbon dioxide, and this is the blood, deoxygenated blood, which is coming through the pulmonary artery from the right heart and then exchanged and again going back to the systemic circulation. This is oxygenated blood going to the systemic circulation by the pulmonary vein. And after this, whenever the carbon dioxide is exchanged from this deoxygenated blood, this has been exhaled through this respiratory tract out of the body. Now the pulmonary capillary dynamics. The pulmonary transit time is only 4 seconds. What is that? That means the pulmonary circulation, the blood from the pulmonary valves to left atrium, it takes 4 seconds. Okay. Now capillary transit time for the RBC is 0.8 seconds. Means within this 0.8 second, oxygen will diffuse from the alveoli and taken up by the hemoglobin. At the same time, the hemoglobin will release the carbon dioxide and diffuse the carbon dioxide to the alveolus. Okay, and this 0.8 second, it decreases during exercise because of the respiratory rate increases. We are going to know a very short discussion about the pulmonary and the systemic circulation. And there is a schematic diagram with this deoxygenated blood which is going out through the pulmonary arteries coming to the lung. There is a diffusion in exchange of the carbon dioxide and oxygen is happening. The oxygen is taken up by the blood and the pulmonary vein. It is coming to the left heart. From the left heart through the aorta going to the systemic circulation. Here the oxygen is released from the hemoglobin taken up by the tissue. At the same time, oxygen released by the tissue taken up by the hemoglobin, also in the dissolved condition, carbon dioxide rich blood comes back to a right heart. This is the whole systemic and the pulmonary circulation. Now, partial pressure. What is that? We have to clear the concept about the partial pressure of gases. The pressure exerted by individual gas in a mixture is called partial pressure. Now, Dundal states that the total pressure of a mixture of gases is the equal to the sum of partial pressure of component of gases. So, as we know, the atmospheric gas is a mixture of different gases like nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and each gases are exerting some pressure. So these individual gases, whatever the pressure is exerting, that is called partial pressure, and the total pressure is a sum of all the partial pressure of gases. So by calculation, it is this total pressure is equal to gas 1, 2 and 3. And as we know, there is in the air, the maximum part of the air is consisted of nitrogen, and rest is almost oxygen, that is 21% and 79%. So the total sea level pressure, if it is 760 millimeter of Hg, then nitrogen contributes about 600 millimeter of Hg, while oxygen contributes this 160 millimeter of Hg. Now we have to know, when we are inhaling this atmospheric air, that what is happening to this partial pressure of these gases. Now we have to know this partial pressure of the different gases in the pulmonary and the systemic circulation, what is happening. We can see in the schematic diagram, we will start from this inspired air, what is exactly atmospheric air. And oxygen is, why we have discussed, it is 158 millimeter of Hg. Carbon dioxide is very less and the nitrogen is this much. When we are inhaling this, you just see after reaching to the terminal alveoli, what is happening to the oxygen level. From 158, it comes to 100 ml. 100 millimeter of Hg. Why? Because of the oxygen what was present in the dead space, it has a less partial pressure of oxygen, so it diluted with that and the partial pressure decreases to 100 millimeter of Hg without the diffusion. Now comes here, the oxygen of this is 40 millimeter of Hg, partial pressure of the 40 millimeter of Hg. Because of this high concentration gradient, here in the alveoli is 100 millimeter of Hg, and in this pulmonary artery it is 40 millimeter of Hg. So because of this high concentration gradient, immediately after reaching to the alveoli, the oxygen is diffused to the pulmonary circulation and the carbon dioxide is exchanged with that. And after coming to the systemic circulation, there is a little drop of this partial pressure of oxygen. From 100 it is comes to 95. Why? What is the reason behind that? Because of the presence of physiological shunt over here, and ultimately the partial pressure of oxygen in the systemic circulation is around 95 millimeter of Hg, with the carbon dioxide is 40 millimeter of Hg. Now you see this nitrogen is still same. There is no change of this nitrogen partial pressure. Coming to the systemic circulation, from the capillary, the oxygen is released to the tissue and from the carbon dioxide is taken up by the capillaries. So in the tissue, the oxygen after releasing or utilizing the oxygen, it becomes very less, so 40 millimeter of Hg, and after metabolizing the carbon dioxide level is higher, 46. From 40 it becomes 46. So this carried through the venous circulation, and this oxygen is 40, carbon dioxide is 46. So this again come to the right heart, from there it is again exchanged, so the cycle continues like this. Now here, because of this 100 to 95, what was the reason is physiologic shunt, what we are going to discuss next. There are right to left shunt. There are two actually. Right to left shunt is there. These are called physiological shunt. And in the clinical condition, we can get the pathological shunt also, that we are not going to discuss here. We are going to discuss about the physiological shunt. A portion of the bronchial circulation which carries the deoxygenated blood, it directly drains into the pulmonary vein which contains oxygenated blood. This is the first one. And another one, the coronary circulation. The coronary circulation is the circulation which supplies the muscle of the heart, and this actually deoxygenated blood directly drains into the left ventricle. So this admixture of this deoxygenated blood to the oxygenated blood decreases the partial pressure of oxygen from 100 to 95 millimeter of Hg. So this is called the physiologic shunt. Now coming to the site of pulmonary exchange, that is a respiratory membrane whose thickness is 0.2 to 0.5 micron. And step by step we will know the parts of that. The first is a fluid and the surfactant layer. Before that, this is the alveolus. This alveolus is surrounded by a fluid and surfactant layer. This is the first one. The gas has to cross the first layer. There's a fluid and surfactant layer. The next one is alveolar epithelium. This is the alveolar epithelium, or the type 1 pneumocyte is mainly this. Type 2 pneumocyte doesn't come into this function. As for the health, it only helps in the secretion of surfactant. And the next is epithelial basement membrane. This is the epithelial basement membrane. Number 3 is the epithelial basement membrane. Next, coming to the interstitial space. This is the interstitial space. This is the interstitial space. Then the capillary basement membrane. This is the capillary basement membrane. Fifth is the capillary basement membrane. Sixth is capillary endothelium. This is all single layer cell. This is also alveolar epithelium is this. This is a single layer cell. Here the capillary endothelium is also single layer cell. And the oxygen, after coming from here the alveoli to this, it comes first to the plasma, then it goes to this red cell membrane. It has to cross the red cell membrane. This red cell membrane, after that, in going inside, it will bind with hemoglobin and forms the oxyhemoglobin. So this is a very important part of the pulmonary gas exchange. Now the factors that affects the diffusion of the gases across the barrier or the alveolar capillary membrane, and which follows a fixed law of diffusion. The diffusion is a process where the molecule moves from the higher concentration to lower concentration. Here also same thing happening from the alveolus. This is oxygen where there is a higher concentration. It is moving from that place to the pulmonary capillary where the concentration is low, and for the carbon dioxide from the capillary to the alveolus. The same thing happening. It follows, there are other factors also which helps in the diffusion, which follows this fixed law of diffusion. Fixed law diffusion states that the diffusion process of the one particular gas is directly proportional to the area of the diffusibility or the diffusion coefficient of that particular gas and the pressure difference, and inversely proportional to the thickness of that area through which it is diffusing. So D is diffusivity or the diffusion coefficient, which is directly proportional to the solubility of that particular gas and inversely proportional to the square root of molecular weight. That means the gas, if it is more soluble, diffusion or diffusivity, it will be increasing, and if the molecular weight is smaller, and this diffusion process will be faster. So the factors again we are going to discuss later, and this follow the fixed law of diffusion. Factors affecting the diffusion of gases. First factor is a difference in the partial pressure across the membrane. This is very important. As we know, the partial pressure of a carbon oxygen is here in the 100 millimeter of Hg, whereas the blood which is carrying by the pulmonary arteries of oxygen, partial pressure of oxygen is 40 millimeter of Hg. These gradients help the diffusion from the alveolus to pulmonary capillary for the oxygen. Now next is the surface area of the membrane. Surface area, if the surface area is more, the diffusion will be more according to the Fink's principle. Then next is the thickness of the membrane. Thickness, if it is okay, means it's enough 0.2 to 0.5 micron, then the diffusion will be perfectly right. Then next is a molecular weight. The lesser the molecular weight, diffusibility is more. Then next is a solubility. Again, so if the solubility is more, it is going to diffuse earlier, like carbon dioxide. And then the diffusing capacity of the particular gas, that we are going to discuss later. Now the clinical aspects where the diffusion may change. The factors which affects the thickness of the membrane, if it is increased, then what happens? Where the clinical situation, the pulmonary edema is one of that. Then pulmonary fibrosis, the thickness increases, so diffusion decreases. The surface area reduces also, in which condition pulmonectomy, that is if the one part of the lung is dissected out. And then emphysema also. The pressure gradient may lost. Where it happens? It happens a pulmonary artery embolism. So these are the clinical factors, clinical condition where the diffusion hampers and the arterial blood gases, the partial pressure of the oxygen and carbon dioxide also change from the normal values. Diffusion across the alveolocapillary membrane differs with the different gases. So first, with this graph, we'll explain this. This side, x-axis is the transient time of a particular gas in the capillary and the partial pressure of that particular gas. First, we will know about the nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide is an anesthetic gases, and because of the diffusibility is the highest and the within 0.1 second it reaches to the equilibrium. That's why it uses as the anesthetic gas also. And what is the meaning of this equilibrium reaches within 0.1 second? Means within this short period, the concentration of the nitrous oxide, whatever in the pulmonary capillary and the alveolus, it is same within 0.1 second. So unless new flow of the blood is coming, there is no diffusion. So whenever the new flow is coming, it is equilibrated within 0.1 second. So this time of diffusion is called flow limited diffusion. You can see from the graph within 0.1 second it comes to the saturation level. Now next is the carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide taken up by the hemoglobin in a high rate, 210 times more than the oxygen, and it reaches the equilibrium within 0.7575 seconds. That means it is binding with the hemoglobin very in high rate. So whatever the carbon monoxide is coming from the alveoli to pulmonary capillary, it is taken up by the hemoglobin. So there is concentration gradient is too high. There is no carbon monoxide in the plasma at that level. So how much carbon dioxide can come? It will be diffused because it is taken up by the hemoglobin. So this is called the diffusion limited diffusion. So carbon monoxide taking this 0.75 second. Now oxygen falls in between. What happens to this? It is taken up by the hemoglobin, but in not that high rate of carbon monoxide, and reaches the equilibrium within 0.3 second. So this type of diffusion called perfusion limited diffusion. We have come to the last part of this pulmonary gas section, that is diffusion capacity of the lung. What is that? This is the volume of the gas that diffuses through the respiratory membrane of lung each minute for a pressure gradient of 1 millimeter of AT. Now, this actually calculation of the diffusion capacity, this is very tough for carbon dioxide because the carbon dioxide is highly soluble in the water. So this is not good for calculation of diffusion capacity. But the best gas which can be utilized for calculation of this diffusion capacity is carbon monoxide, because it is not soluble and it is non-toxic to the body, and it is taken up by the hemoglobin very fast. And there is a, for this what has happened, this is a calculation. The diffusion capacity of the carbon monoxide is equal to the volume of the carbon monoxide which is inhaled divided by the carbon monoxide concentration in the alveolar gas and the carbon monoxide concentration in the pulmonary capillary. Now, this concentration of this any kind of gas after diffusion from the pulmonary capillary, it is very tough to measure. So this carbon monoxide is taken as, because this carbon monoxide after diffusion, it is taken completely by the hemoglobin, and there is a no plasma carbon monoxide. So this pulmonary capillary partial pressure of carbon monoxide comes to 0. There is no need to measure this carbon monoxide concentration in the pulmonary capillary because it is already 0. Now easily we can calculate, we can get this value. How? This carbon monoxide is inhaled by a subject by 1 minute and the nose is clipped, and after breath holding 10 minutes the carbon monoxide filled air is exhaled and the exhaled air is analyzed. So we can get the difference between how much carbon monoxide was there before and how much it has exhaled. So difference between that is the amount of the carbon monoxide present after diffusion, and the volume already we know what the person has been inhaled. So it is taken by 1 minute, and for carbon dioxide it's almost zero, what we have explained, and ultimately the calculation comes to this is the volume of the carbon monoxide the person is taken in and the alveolar carbon monoxide which the person is exhaled minus how much it is taken. So the value of the diffusion capacity of carbon monoxide is 17 milliliter per minute. Now from this we can calculate the diffusion capacity of oxygen too. And how much is that? If we multiply 1.2 with the 17, that is approximately 20 milliliter per minute per millimeter of AG, that is a 1 millimeter of pressure difference, the 20 milliliter of oxygen can be diffused through the alveolocapillary membrane. And what is this 1.2 is a diffusion coefficient of the oxygen is almost 1.2 times of the carbon monoxide. Now with the discussion of the diffusion capacity, here we end the pulmonary gas exchange. Thank you.